Hello and welcome. Based on the climate engineering argument map, this movie introduces the arguments Contra research into climate engineering methods. The R&D obligation, thesis T1, is contradicted by the claim that it is wrong to investigate CE methods, that is, thesis T6. Accordingly, arguments in support of T6 raise objections against CE research. The no informed consent objection, A97, argues that we should only research into climate engineering if there's a broad and informed consensus on doing so. Objection A96 condemns CE research as a transfer of risks to future generations because with such research, future generations will bear the risks of CE deployment instead of the current generation who has caused the problem bearing the risks and burdens of mitigation. The risk transfer objection thus relies on a version of the intergenerational polluter pays principle depicted at the very top of the argument map. Back to the criticism of R&D. It has also been argued, A99, that CE research is likely to lead to situations where future generations face severe global dilemmata because of the termination problem. The termination problem refers to the fact that most CE methods have no viable exit options. If terminated abruptly, catastrophic consequences ensue. In a brief digression, we may note that, as shown in the upper part of the argument map, the termination problem also represents a major objection against deploying climate engineering methods. Finally, Objection A98 claims that the true motive for carrying out R&D is simply to pass on the bag to future generations, and that R&D is morally wrong for being motivated by such reasons. Besides these direct objections against R&D, we shall consider the critical arguments that highlight negative side effects of CE research. These arguments have a dual dialectical function. On the one hand, they attack thesis T3 and hence undermine the central justification of R&D. On the other hand, they give rise to a direct objection against R&D, which is intuitively clear. If the negative consequences of some action outweigh its positive ones, that's a reason not to do it. This relationship is visualized as follows in the argument map. The negation of T3, as shown by the red arrow, fuels argument A5, side effects unacceptable. A5 in turn supports the R&D prohibition T6. So, what are the alleged negative side effects of climate engineering research? The argument map lists various potential unintended consequences of R&D. The most prominent one is the risk that R&D obstructs mitigation efforts, A9. That fear is substantiated by identifying different mechanisms which might trigger such a negative effect on mitigation efforts. In sum, the argument map contains different types of criticism of R&D. Now, if you disapprove of R&D, you are not required to accept all these various objections. If, however, you accept the R&D obligation, you are compelled, for reasons of consistency, to refute every single critical argument. And that means, in particular, that you have to refute the direct objections, as well as the argument which concludes that the negative side effects of R&D outweigh its intended purpose. Thank you very much for your attention.